Hello everyone, season's greeting from Revan619. I hope you're all having a fantastic set of holidays. Today, I wanted to follow up from a video I did recently. Well, I say recently, it was a little while back now. But I did my top 5 weapons, and I set the little stipulation that I was only going to use one per class, so I had to throw in some different sort of weapon styles there. Maybe I would have done more of top 5 straight swords and curved swords. But to avoid that, I did one with rapiers, I did a reaper, and so on and so forth. But this time, I wanted to follow that up with the top meta builds. And this time, I'm not setting any stipulations. I'm going to set forward what I think is the current Dark Souls 3 meta at the time of recording. So this is going to be more my personal opinion. But this is also going to be based more on tournament fact. Whereas before I did my top 5 favourite weapons, this time I'm going to do things that are the top arguably meta of the game. So we're going to be going through these playstyles, these builds. I'm going to give you some examples and explain how you can change them, because it's all your own flavour really. Like, you can say what a meta build is, but some people are going to change points here, some people are going to change points there because they have slightly different playstyles. Maybe they want to have a slightly different weapon as long as it works in the build. Me personally, I don't optimize my armor. I know some people will go out there, they'll go on Souls Planner, they'll set in some little stats there, and they'll set the, because you can set what minimums you want in some areas, and you can set what to focus on other areas, and they'll call themselves the Build Master because they have the ugliest armor in the world, but that doesn't make them good at doing builds. That makes them good at using a tool that someone else invented. Kind of like people who do videos where they just copy some information off Reddit and pass it off as their own. But anyway, I'm going to get into where I think the current meta is, what my builds are, and what I like to go with the fashion of them. Yes, you're going to be able to change that around. I'll explain where you can change some stats so you can suit the playstyle to yourself a little bit. I'm going to also explain a little bit about the playstyle, how to play it, and how to counter it. So without further ado, and in no particular order, let's start looking at the builds that I consider the top of the meta. Okay, so the first build I'm going to be looking at is probably the most versatile one in the game, where it's not exactly the most powerful on this list, but it's going to be the best in the most situations, which is of course the Dark build. Now, my standard setup in the Dark build, I have a Dark Infused Lothric Knight Sword, a Black Knight Shield. Offhand, I have myself a Light Crossbow, which I can use with Splintering Bolts for finishes or Exploding Bolts to catch people rolling around. And in my other hand, I have Sacred Chime, which I can normally use to put Tears of Denial or regen against passive opponents. When you play with this build, you're going to be both aggressive and defensive thanks to the shield. Basically, Black Knight Shield will make nearly any physical weapon essentially useless unless it has some crazy speed and reach, which is, say, Pontiff Knight Curved Sword. Against most other things, if you can't roll it, you'll block it. You don't ever want to stand there and take a load of hits on R1s. You're mostly going to be wanting to block when there are times when you're not sure about the spacing or you can't roll in time. So if you come out of a roll, you can actually block quicker than you can roll a second time, so you can avoid damage that way. If your opponent has a slight bit of latency and you want to test going in and you're not sure if that would clip you or not, then that's why you'll have the shield up. So it's basically you can take one hit on the shield and roll out, which is better than taking 2 hits that you would do normally. So looking at the stats on the build that I'm going to be showing you today is, we are using the Prisoner's Chain, so I've got 35 Vigor, 35 Endurance, and 15 Vitality because I'm on starting class Knight, but Prisoner's Chain bumps up by 5. Yes, that is very worthwhile. So overall I have 40 Vigor, 14 Attunement, 40 Endurance, 20 Vitality, 18 Strength for Black Knight Shield, 30 Dexterity, 30 Intelligence, and 30 Faith. Now, normally you can lower the Dexterity and up the Strength to get a little bit more defenses, and you'll still roughly have the same sort of damage. At the moment I am sitting at 514 on this Dark LKS. The reason I've actually gone for higher dex is because of weapon swapping. Weapon swapping on this build is very viable. Now, I apologise in advance, I haven't gone Dark Gem farming, so I haven't got them already. But some great weapons to switch to. One thing I will note is you do want to keep a Dark and Chaos version of your weapon. The reason you have a Chaos version is if someone swaps to a Dark Block Shield that's got, say, 99 resistant, you can then just swap to the Chaos version and you'll still damage through it. But sort of weapons that you can swap to is going to be stuff like a Dark Scimitar, because it's faster and it's going to be easier to get in, a lot more damage because it has a much better running attack. The R1s are, like I said, a little bit faster, and they can actually go through the R2 of the straight sword combos. So with this, you can have a nice little swap there. Some other people obviously like to use some quicker stuff with some quick step, like the Dark Harp itself. There's some people will actually like to, instead of having Sacred Chime there offhand, you could have a Blessed or a Dark Caestus, so you can use things like Perseverance. Common little thing to do is get that, and you've got 5 seconds of infinite poise, so you can apply some pressure onto your opponent. The common combos with the Dark build using the straight sword is R1, R1, and then going for the R2 on a roll catch. Now, like I said, a scimitar or other curved swords are actually quick enough to R1 before you can get that R2 off. So against the curved sword, it's actually safer just to go for 3 R1s and then move on and go for the roll catch and with some staggered R1s like that. Some other choices you've got here, you will need to drop the shield if you then want to go for a 4-pronged plow, but a 4-pronged plow in main hand and in your offhand with, say, a straight sword is actually really, really good, because obviously you've got the running pokes, you've got the damage. If they roll through it, then obviously they're going to go into that. Some people like to use whips this way. I'm not a big fan of the whip idea, but if you notice that my rings here, I am using a life ring, which I can swap into Sun Princess, red tier stone or blue tier stone and still have the weight. But I'm using a Havel's ring. A lot of people like to use sword or shield ring to start with, and then you'll swap that to, say, a Chloranthe. But the reason I like to use Havel's ring is because I like to have the heavier armor for the heavier defense, and I like to have a crossbow offhand. Again, standard ring here, ring of favor. You want to bring your lightning urns. Stuff like black fire bombs are very helpful. Stuff that's also helpful, throwing those finishes. Other options that you have here is if you use Saintry Bellvine, your offhand, you can actually, instead of using Tears of Null, can use something like Great Magic Barrier. Great Magic Barrier, absolutely fantastic for dealing with mages. It's actually quite quick to cast, especially if you're using Saintry Bellvine, because that increases your casting speed. And boom, you've got that on. Now you've got some massive magic defenses. The way you want to play against a mage is actually just avoiding his hits and going in there. Most mages will play a very defense style where they'll set up Soul Mass, and then they'll stun you with it, and then they'll go for some R1s. This will just reduce the damage of that zoning. So yeah, this is probably one of the most diverse builds, and not just because of its offensive swaps like I've already covered, but some of the defensive shield swaps. Against a magic user, you can go for a 75% magic shield. You've got your Lothric's shield, which can give you 95% lightning shield when it's lightning infused, which is absolutely great. You've got your Dragon Head, which can make a very offensive shield. It's got a lot of fire resistance, not much stability, but the way you use this is you move in on your opponent, you go for this, which will stun and block through their hit, and then you can set up some more R1 combos. And finally, there's also just Ethereal Oak Shield. If you've got this on and you've got your Sun Princess ring and you've already stacked some regen here, you will be regenning a lot. So your opponent, if they're playing passive, it's just a really good way to punish them. The weapon art, of course, is very useful to get hyper armor. You also get 60% resistances going in. The Shield Splitter, not as useful because most good players won't get hit by that, but if you're against a slightly inexperienced player, then yes, you will be able to land that, which is pretty nice. Some other weapon choices we do have here. You've got the Dark Serpent Hatchet, which, although the second R1 is quite bad tracking, the first one is the same as a straight sword. It's got quite a bit of range. It's got more recovery than a straight sword, and if you two-hand it, it's got even more than that. But it has some very good shield splitting. It can also boost its own damage, so it is an option. I once saw Dante WTF almost flawless closed tripod in a tournament with this like this. He's also beating players like Gabri from the PC. So it is useful. I wouldn't really consider that a swap. I've also seen a lot of people using Club, but they're not so much using the Club itself. It's more they're just using the Perseverance gimmick and then just going in and using the Club's R1s. Not good reach, fairly long recovery, very easy to punch with a crossbow. Two-handed, yeah, it does have some hyper armor. If you're good at your reaction trades, then that can be useful. Overall, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a gimmick in itself, and again, you're just relying on the Perseverance. That's what you're playing there, which, again, just be better on straight sword. So yeah, this is going to be the first build I'm showing you that I truly consider meta. The armors that I'm using is Sunset Helm, Millwood Knight Armor, Knight Gauntlets, and Lapse Leggings. Reason I'm using that is because, yeah, I've got my 30% resistances in physical, strike is about 24, slash is 30 again, thrust is a little bit low, 27, magic 20, fire 21, a little bit low on the with the lightning on the 19, and dark on the 20. Yes, you can, on the same weight, have better defenses here and still be able to ring swap into, say, red tier stone ring. But like I said, I like me a bit of fashion. When I do my build, I normally actually pick the chest and then I see what's optimal around that using Souls Planner. And I just really like the whole look here of the Sunset Helm and the Millwood chest. I just think they look really good. Of course, I like myself the Knight Gauntlets because they just look nice, and the lap leggings, good defense, and yeah, it brings the whole ensemble together, and it has nice little bits of gold in it. So yeah, that's going to be my first build that I'm showing you here. Like I said, Exploding Bolts, Splintering Bolts. Splintering Bolts can be swapped to Lightning Bolts. Sorry, I am talking very quickly here. But there's a lot of information I want to get in, and there's, yeah, not that much time in the video. So yeah, that's going to be build number 1. Now, as some of the more PvP inclined of you might have realised from looking at build number 1 there, a lot of this information on this list is going to be stuff that I've already covered before, builds that I've already made quite popular and other people have been using for a while, but not everyone is that knowledgeable in PvP and not everyone knows this. Hell, there's still some people out there who are trying to convince you that Mad King Crucifix is meta, which is legally retarded in all honesty, but at the same time, if you're not that in-depth on PvP and your favourite build or your favourite weapon doesn't make it into the list, do not be discouraged. I am not saying that you should only use these builds. What I'm saying is these builds are kind of what's at the top of the game, and if you don't use them, that's even better. You should be more proud of your wins, and if you do lose to one of the builds on this and you're on a less optimal build, then if anything you should just be more proud that you beat that guy, because that's just you, pure skill doing it. And again, build itself doesn't matter as much as individual player skill and knowledge of the game. You can be on a much worse build and still beat someone on a much better build. Player skill does matter. It's more when you have two people at the exact same skill level that's where the build's going to matter the most. So let's move on to build number 2, shall we? Now this is a fashion that's not going to be winning any competitions, but it is a painfully optimized build, and that is the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword. Now this is probably one of the closest things that's the only like quality build on the list, and it is a physical weapon, but it's a physical weapon that doesn't care about shields, which is of course the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword. So let's have a quick look at this build that I'm rocking for you here, so we can sort of talk through it and explain it to you. Okay, so again, I'm using Prisoner's Chain to even out some of my stats here, but overall, I've got 35 Vigor, which obviously goes up to 40. We've got 14 Attunement Tiers now. We've got 35 Endurance, which goes up to 40. Again, these are soft caps. Those 40/40s, you don't really want to be going over them. Vitality, I actually have 23, which goes up to 28, and it's because of the weight. And the reason I'm able to get that up so high is because my strength is only 32. You see, two-handed, the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword caps at 26 strength and 40 dexterity. Meaning from 26 strength, you normally only get 1 AR increase per point of strength, and sometimes none at all. Like from 32 to 33, you actually get no AR increase two-handed, but it does increase one-handed. I've got the 10 intelligence, which you do need a minimum for the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword, and I've got 18 faith, so I can use Sacred Triumph Villanor for regen. Again, it just counts as passive players. Rings, starting up here, we've got Life Ring, we've got Shield Ring, Prisoner's Chain, Ring of Favour. I've still got my light crossbow on there because, although I didn't really cover it too much when I was doing build videos before, it's something that I've always kept on any build that is competitive. Because even one-handed, if you're going for running attacks here and people are avoiding you, those roll catches on that crossbow is absolutely fantastic. Using cases offhand, so again, if you do want to use Perseverance, you can be going off and doing all that sort of stuff. You can even parry with it in your left hand, although parries are somewhat inconsistent, but if you're fighting off an opponent, you know they're going for it, then do it. The reason Pontiff Knight Curved Sword is so good is, like I said before, if you've eaten 2 R1s on a straight sword and you know your opponent's going to go for an R2, you can actually R1 out of it. I think there are rumours going around that the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword has actually got a little bit faster startup than some other curved swords. I'm not too sure, but I can tell you it is one of the flip curved swords, and they weren't nerfed. Kick curved swords like Calf's Curved Sword and even like bleed builds in general were heavily nerfed. So if anyone's telling you that the old like Follower Saber, Calf Curved Sword are still meta, they haven't played since the DLC, which was quite a while back now. Yes, the strategies for using this, one of the things you can do is if you go with the running attack, you can then go with the backflip attack, which gives you some hyper armor to get out. If you go for the running attack and then immediately go for R1, other curved sword builds will be able to hit you faster, so you have to be careful. Even an S stock can do that. There are very few weapons that have enough recoverability to go for it, but the running attack on this, way better than on straight sword. Again, The R1 distance on this is absurd. The distance you travel with R1s is absurd. And unlike the scimitar, this has a much more useful weapon art, which it just has some really, really good distance roll catching. If you missed the first one, I would not suggest going for the second one because the recovery is quite long and you can get yourself punished. But it is usable. If you get in 2 hits, you know they're going to panic roll. You can go for that and do it quite well. Because you're on a physical build, you can be using your black fire bombs as well as your throwing knives. But that's going to be sort of your main strategies with this. It's going to be spacing and walking pressure. You're going to be wanting to keep in your opponent's faces and then doing staggered R1s to catch their rolls. Obviously, if you can land one safely, go for 2, and then every time the panic roll, you catch it. You catch it. One of the best players known for doing this is B-Dubs, who is absolutely fantastic. Loads of people try copying him, but this is just such an R1 mashable weapon. Yeah, my offhand, I have Sacred Charm of Philionor because, yeah, regen at the start of duel, it gives you an extra 200 health, and if your opponent's playing passive, very useful. Blessed case, it's also got some regen there, and light crossbow. For my armor, Lap's Helm, Lap's Chest, Wing Knight Gauntlets, and Herald Legion. Yes, you can probably get slightly more, but those defenses are really good. It's a little bit higher than it should be because obviously Lloyd's Shield Ring. But once you take a hit on that, say you've been hit once, you can either swap your life ring over to Sun Princess to get some regen on, or if you're low enough, Chloranthe, or if you're fighting someone against a shield, you've got your Night Slayer's Ring. But either way, you do that to drop that to maybe get a second use out of this. Once that's gone, you can then put that over to Chloranthe until later on in the duel, which is then when you're going to want to swap over to your blue tier stone ring and your red tier stone ring, so you can survive those extra hits and just do some big damage towards the end of it. Yeah, that's mostly how you're going to be using this. Those are going to how your swaps work. And again, this is one of the most offensive classes in the game. If you're a passive player who only plays React and only Punish, you're going to do well. You're not going to do as well as someone who's also really aggressive, keeping in your opponent's face, punishing their every move, reactive rolling their hits, and then just punish them going for it. Oh, be wary, you don't really want to go for rolling attacks because it's very easy to punish. And even if you land it, 9 times out of 10, you're still going to take damage because, yeah, the stun on it isn't very good. So if you land a rolling attack, you better get ready to roll because they're going to be able to hit you quickly. And you're probably not going to be able to have your recovery to be able to go for an R1 yourself. Alternatively, you can start the Sword Ring. You don't need as high vitality as I have because I just wanted to get a little bit extra defenses here. 32, 28, 32, 32 again. Magic is 22, Fire is 23, Lightning is 21, Dark's 23. So it is some fairly good defenses. And like I said, you're going to be having a lot of regen on this, and you're going to be able to be just very aggressive, very damaging. It's going to be very hard for a lot of builds to even counter this. The shields, yes, they can be useful, but they have to play very defensively. They don't want to be whiffing because you've got more distance than them. Yes, they can use the Gotthards, which again, amazing range, but because of the weight, that's why I didn't use it on my dark build, but that is an option for the dark build. The build that I'm going to show you after this does have an interesting matchup against this, but yeah, if you like your standard R1 plays, don't like swapping around, you like focusing on just one weapon, then this is definitely the build to go for you. It's so much more aggressive and it's so much easier because at the end of the day, if you're just playing as an R1 masher, you're always going to win on this build compared to another R1 mash build. Against hyper armor builds, this is quick enough to trade into a greatsword and still swing, roll the damage of their swing, especially against ultras. You can be in an ultra's face and he's not swinging. If he does swing, you can reactive roll. If he goes for a second hit, you'll backstab him. If he doesn't, you can just be like that, you can like that, and then eventually when you go for your R1, you're either going to get your 2 R1s, or if you land one hit and they've started up, so they're getting ready to trade, you can actually land the hit and roll as well. So if you time that right, you can hit and roll their swing. It's crazy ridiculous. It's very rare that you'll get a lot of trouble from people with an ultra great sword or a great sword, which an ultra great sword, worst class in the game. Great hammer's second worst class. Big weapons, very slow, very hard to do. There are a few exceptions, like obviously you've got Leaders, which has an amazing weapon art. There are sometimes you can use ultras if you have a fast offhand, but again, you're crutching on the offhand. It's not that main weapon. But those sort of builds aren't going to be here in the top builds video. If there are some that you like, do link them down below and you can talk about them, explain why you think they're good. Yes, they might not be meta, but it's still enjoyable, and meta doesn't always mean the most enjoyable. And then again, just because using meta doesn't mean you're not going to have fun with it. So that's build number 2. Let's move on to build number 3. Now, build 3 is a bit of a messy one, and you might question this at first, but allow me to get rid of those disillusions that you might have with this build, and that is, of course, a homing soul mass build. Now, the whole purpose of this build is mostly this one spell, and everything around it is to support it. Now, I have once famously on my old channel referred to this as the most boring and tedious playstyle in all of Dark Souls history, and it upset a lot of mages, but this build is very effective. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the GamesFAQs mages who have used this very effectively, and this is the build aimed at someone who, say the sort of person on a shooting game goes into a team objective match and will sit in one spot and camp the entire match, and they only care about their own personal kill-death ratio. They don't care about objectives, they don't care about winning, all they care about is sniping. This is the build for you. So let's have a little look at it, shall we? And then I'll explain the style. Now, let's go into the old status menu because that'll be a little bit easier to look at. Okay, so I'm again using Prisoner's Chain, very important. It is a very common and useful thing, and since the buff I use it on everything. Why not? 15 free levels for 4% reduction on your armor. It's amazing. So I've got 35 Vigor, which goes up to 40. I've got 30 Attunement. There is another variant where you can use yourself 24 attunement, saving 6 points there, which means you drop a spell, but you can use the Black Knight Shield, but you'll want to move some other stats around to increase your endurance up to 40, because that is very important if you're going to use the Black Knight Shield. Because I'm on a Knight, I've got 20 Vitality. All my builds I've put mostly around the Knight. Base Strength, Base Dex, which is 13 and 12. 59 Intelligence and 18 Faith. Spells that I have on here are the Homing Soul Mass, which is of course your bread and butter, Affinity, Great Soul Arrow, Farron Hail, and Great Farron Dart. And if you had a look at my rings here, I had Bellow and Dragon Quest rings, so which is the big damaging one. I've only got one. The Sage's Ring +2 to increase my spell casting speed, Prisoner's Chain for the extra stats, and Ring of Favor because it's just all around awesome. Now, I'm not using full damage, and the spells I'm using are the small, quickly damaging ones. So you might be thinking, but I want to be the big blaster. No, sir. That is not how you play this style at all. We're using the longsword. I've got some other items on here, but we'll explain those setups later. I've got the Crown of Dusk, which obviously increases all magic damage from weapon by 5% and your spells by 10%. Against another mage, you're going to want to switch over to Sage's Blindfold because it does take your magic absorption down to -6, but Sage's Blindfold, it does boost all that sort of stuff. I'm using Lothric Knight Armor with Sunset Gauntlets and Lapse Leggings. I've got the Court Sorcerer's Staff, which is the best one. I've got Ethereal Oak Shield in my offhand. In my main hand, I've got Sacred Triumph Philonor and a Simplicastus with a Crystal Longsword. You might be thinking, well, what happens if I go against someone stacking magic resistance? Well, a little thing I want to show you here is, see my Crystal Longsword has 459 AR. Not exactly the biggest out there, but if we swap over to our Dark one, it's 437, so yeah, it's 22 less AR, so having to swap to a Dark Longsword, not really going to hinder you too much. So if your opponent has 100% 100% Magic Shield, then this is still very effective. Great Magic Barrier is not going to do your damage down that much, and you're still going to be able to zone with all your spells just as you could do before. And of course, when you've got your Crown of Dusk on, that does up your damage quite nicely. So the main playstyle of this is you're going to be wanting to run away from your opponent and setting up Homing Soul Mass, and then do nothing. If your opponent throws a ranged attack, avoid it, step around it. And what you want to do is, as they come in at you, just as they get in melee range, is you turn so they either have to roll or they get stunned. This will then stun them, and then you'll be able to go with your 2 R1s and then your roll catching. So that's mainly what you're going to be doing here, is just keeping away from your opponent. If they're on you, you're going to scare them off with some R1s here. You're going to get away from them, and the casting speed, it's very, very quick. It doesn't cost much at all. So you're going to keep Homing Soul Mass up, and even if they go to do a melee, you can then trade with this, which will stun them and still leave you open to go for this. So if you trade an R1, then yeah, they take an R1, but they also take your full spell. A good thing to mix it up is with the casting times of Affinity. If your opponent is using 100% Dark Block Shield, you can get Affinity up, turn, these will slowly chase them, and this will allow you to then go in with your old R1s. They're using 100% Magic Block Shield, of course you can be using your Dark Longsword, so it's going to mess up their times and allow you to go in. One of the great punishing things is Great Soul Arrow. It is so fast it can't even be punished by Chaos Bed Vestiges. You've got your Farron Hail to catch some panic rolls, but you do have to be careful. People can just run around that and backstab you, and if they time their rolls right, they can actually just roll through it and then hit you in the face. And last of all, Great Farron Dart, which is the best finishing spell. It is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, that's the build. It's literally, your whole game here is going to be setting up between your homing soul masses and your regular affinities and keeping away from your opponent. One of the big things you have to worry about is crossbows. Crossbows will punish you and they are very hard to counter. I do recommend having a shield, so if your opponent is doing nothing and not coming at you, you just swap over to your ethereal oak shield and you can regen. You can still use your weapon art like this, which is still fairly useful. But yeah, the regen, because if your opponent's not coming at you, you're going to want to regen. One of the biggest weaknesses to this build is you're not... In the arena, you've only got 5 casts, so the time limit means that worst case you'll draw, best case you'll win. In Pontiff, however, you will want to be the summoner, because if you're not summoning, you can't have your 15 like Ashen Esters or 14 or whatever it is you want to have there. You want to have the maximum number of Ashens because there is no time limit. Your opponent can just wait, and you want to be able to outwait them. So you're going to want to be very careful with your spell uses. Only use it for when you can get guaranteed damage and going in like that. Another reason we have our Ethereal Oak Shield is because we can also use Sacred Charm Philonor, which is why I've got the 18 Faith, because I can just get on double regen. If I'm sitting here with my opponent's not coming at me, boom, I've got these both going at, and yeah, even if they then come at me, I can still use a strategy of turn and then melee, and I've still got the shield here, which I can block one hit. You don't want to block too much because it's got fairly low stability. And also, we've got Castus in the last slot. You can use Simple or Crystal, wherever you want to do damage not, but you can set up yourself your Perseverance and then go in with your melee very quickly. Good old Hyper Armor. And this is a very diverse build. It requires a very specific mindset. Your average Dark Souls player will get very bored fighting this or using it. Like, not many people are going to want to fight you too much, but you are going to do very well and you will win with it. Honestly, I do believe that with the right playstyle, this is meta. I've seen it do very well in tournaments. I've seen players like Kai, I think H2O, I think his name was, it's done very well. I've seen other people copy their variants of it, like Robert Horton copied builds of this. I think there was some guy called Primo on PC who was once in a tournament who did this as well, and it can be very useful. The things you're going to have to worry about for crossbows. Very hard to fight with this, because every time you cast, you're going to get punished. And they can just move in at you, get you to use your spells, and just move around you. If they keep wide and make you blast your spells early, they can punish you. Something that can be also fairly worrisome, but not too worrisome, is also Perseverance. You're going to want to move away from that. One thing to be very careful is Pontiff Knight Curve Sword. The reach on that is deceptive, and it can punish and catch you. B-Dubs absolutely destroyed Robert Haunting one KH Knights tournaments when he was using a very similar setup to this. So yeah, you're going to want to be very careful of that. And again, you don't need to worry about dipping your damage a bit, because it's about small chipping spells that build up over time. Again, you're going to be a little bit aggressive. You're going to, if your opponent's trying to put on regen, you're going to punish that with Great Soul Arrows. So if that, you'll be able to punish the cast every time. It is very, very useful. And also, if you don't know, when you cycle your spells, if you hold up, you'll always go back to your first spell. So it will jump straight back to the first one by holding up. So that's a very good one to manage your spells. Same with your items. If you hold down, it'll go back to your first item. So what I do is I normally always set my main homing soul mass here. So if I'm at Windmill Bow, I've gone for that, and then they're coming at me and I want to get ready to set it up, it's going to be the spell I'm using the most. And I can quickly switch between that and obviously Affinity. Remember, Affinity uses a lot of magic, so you're going to want to be using that sparsely. But this is build number 3. It's something I consider meta. It's very useful. You're not going to make friends with this build, but you are going to do very well with this build. The fourth and final meta build that I'm going to bring you today is my personal favourite. I made this build the day we had access to this Demon Scar weapon, and that video got a few 100k views on the old channel, which is a shame that that video's gone. But that is, of course, my personal Demon Scar build and setup, which may seem like an obvious one at first, but very specific spell choices and item setup here, which is what makes this build unique to me, and I absolutely love this build. It is my go-to build. Its main weakness is only going to be against weapons with a lot more reach that can safely attack you, like the Pontiff Knight Curve Sword, or someone who's so laggy that you can't use the true combo, which I'll talk about, because without the true combo you essentially have dagger damage on this weapon. But yes, so 125 standard meta, 35 Vigor, which is boosted by Prisoner's Chain. Again, I've got that on here as well. 24 Attunement, 30 Endurance, which was 25. We've got 20 Vitality here, because I'm using a heavier version than normal. You can actually have much lower Vitality, much lighter armor, and put those points elsewhere. 12 Strength, 16 Dexterity, 14 Intelligence, 14 Faith for maximum damage here. On the items themselves, I've got main hand Demon Scar with offhand dagger. Offhand dagger is to counter very specific setups, but you can very easily have an offhand Sacred Charm Philonor for regen. My main hand, I've also got Sanctuary Bellvine, and offhand, I've got a Dark Caestus because I like to use Perseverance. You can use Blessed if you want, if you go for some of our ones, you want some passive regen. In here, I've got my standard setup, which is Great Swamp Ring. I've got Prisoner's Chain, Witch's Ring, and Ring of Favor. You can use Sword Ring. You can swap Great Swamp Ring to Princess Ring if you need to get some regen in there. Or even later in the game, I didn't set this version up to be able to red tier stone, but normally I would. I'm using XL Mask, Morn's Armor, Wing Knight Gauntlets, and Lap's Leggings, which gives me some pretty nice defenses. We got 31 physical there, 26 versus strike, 32 versus slash, 30 versus thrust, magic's 23, fire's 24, lightning's 21, and dark's 20, and my base defenses, flat defenses, are a little bit higher because I have that 20 vitality. The reason I did this was because playtesting with B-dubs, I was able to survive one extra hit in our duels. But you might be thinking, no Sage's Ring, isn't that going to slow your cast speed? Well, not with the Sanctuary Bellvine offhand, because even when you two-hand a weapon, this is why this build was unique to me, was because I put that there, which meant that I didn't need to use Sage's Ring, and I could use Prisoner's Chain and still have my full casting speed. The main combo you're going to look at in this one is R1 true combos into Black Flame. The only time it won't is when your opponent is exceedingly laggy, and in those situations I would not suggest using this build because this is the same length as the Scimitar, and the two R1s, the damage is very low on standard 2R1s because you've only got 347 AR. It's pure fire though, but you're going to be doing around 800 plus damage on an R1 Black Flame, and then if they panic roll, you can go again for an R1 Black Flame. If your opponent is a parry spammer, you can do a nice little combo where you can go R1 Black Flame, they go for the parry, do the weapon art, which will then allow you to true combo another R1. If you're quick enough, a Chaos Bed Vestiges or a Black Flame, although the R1 is much safer and it requires a lot less stamina. And of course, Fire Surge pressure. Fire Surge, absolutely fantastic at keeping up pressure. I use aggressive Fire Surge. If you watch my tournament video, I beat some of the best players out there with this. I destroyed Closed Tripod pretty easily. I beat Skip to my Nash with it. I beat... Who else did I play in that tournament? There was a couple of other Metalheads, I'm forgetting. Oh, yeah, Solus, but he was meme build, but he didn't really have any counter to it. And, yeah, against the Lagstar, I unfortunately had to switch because my true combos just weren't damaging and he could roll out of two R1s as if I wasn't pressing R1. But anyway, I've also got Chaos Bed Vestiges here. A lot of mediocre players say that this is a bad spell, but Chaos Bed Vestiges is fantastic for punching a lot of things. Now, if you just go out there and you're throwing this aggressively, you're probably not going to be damaging people, and it's not going to work. They're just going to roll through it. But you can use this to trade a running attack, and at close range, if you hit that on a running attack, you can then R1 Black Flame, and that will be a 3-hit true combo that will do 1200 plus damage. Against a Great Sword, you can roll their first hit, or if you just space their first hit, and as they swing, you'll be able to punish that with the Chaos Bed Vestiges. Same versus nearly any hyper armor weapon, besides maybe a Halberd, which is slightly quick enough to get out of it, depending on the range that you're at. But you can also use it to punish other casters. You can't use it to get a lot of sorceries like Great Soul Arrow, but you can use it to get on some of the slower ones like Affinity or Crystal Soul Spear. Fire Surge, absolutely fantastic for punching things like Lightning Arrow, moving around against even a Homing Soulmass Turtle. If you don't go in their melee range, you just keep distance and chip and chip and chip. When they do turn to get you with their Homing Soulmass, or you can actually just run around it and then you can R1 Black Flame them. It's fantastic. I've used it to punish a lot of mages. This is my favourite playstyle because obviously Curved Sword, best two-hand moveset in the game. You've obviously got your really good running attacks which you can then go out with flipping in some hyper armor. The R1 Black Flame, absolutely huge damage, and if you roll catch them and then do it again, it's exponential. Like, you do 1600 damage potentially. It's crazy. I've got so many clips floating around my channel of me just beating someone in the arena in 3 seconds flat. This has all the utility that you really want. Of course, Lightning Urns because it scales S with Fave, so it's a nice little bit of extra projectiles in there. Again, you can use your weapon art. You've got even one-handed. It makes the backflip a little bit quicker, so you can use that a bit better. Like I said, I've got the dagger on here because I like to obviously roll backstab some big weapons. And against katanas that are only doing running attacks, you can actually get through them and just bam, bam, and catch their panic rolls as they're trying to get away from you. You can actually stun up bigger weapons, or you can just have regen on here. Again, I sometimes like to use Caestus. You can use that just to use the old hyper armor. So if you've got your main setup here and just go in there, then you've obviously got yourself some hyper armor trades there, which is absolutely fantastic. because when you've got Perseverance up, it also reduces your damage. I'm going to try and edit in some clips of showing me fighting with these whilst I've been talking with them, but these are the top meta builds in my opinion. If you have some differences or some differing opinions, then do let me know. Yes, there are many variants of these builds, like you can jig around stats and still essentially have a similar build, but damages, armors, fashions, all very different depending on how you like to optimize it and run it yourself. Again, with this build, you can actually go into a duel starting off with Dark Moon Ring, and then you can cast Tears of Denial, and then you just switch that over to Great Swamp, and then you just drop your Tears of Denial, so then it's not on your bar. So those are my picks for my builds. Let me know what yours are, and we'll see if there's any other mare builds. I could only think of 4, and these were the 4 top of the mare builds that I came up with. So there you have it. Those were my picks for the top mare builds in Dark Souls 3 at time of recording. Like I said, if you have a favourite build or weapon that wasn't mentioned, then do definitely use it. Like, this is not me saying that these are the only builds that are viable, you shouldn't use anything. I will never be the person to use that. I was using Pyromancer, free aim, invasions. Like, people who know my old channel when it got up to 10k subs knew I started as a Pyromancer invader. I did free aim. I took on Scott Junt, who famously ran away from actually fighting me when I called him out when he said all Pyromancers are bad and he would fight anyone. Refused to fight me on it, and then copied one of my builds but dropped one of the weapons. But yeah, so if you have something else, like again, Split Leaf, absolutely amazing in the arenas because you will practically one-shot someone from 1R1. I'm a huge fan of offhand Yorms and some other crazy gimmicky setups. So like I said, if you have a playstyle that you do like to use, then definitely do that. Don't feel bad for your build. Use what you like to play. If you want to use meta, use meta. If you don't want to use meta, don't. Don't let anyone judge you for it. It's just salty fanboys who are just trying to give you grief because they're mad that they lost at the video game and you won. So yeah, this is me saying, use what you like. Here's what I think's the best. Do let me know what you disagree on, and if you have something that you consider meta that maybe I haven't seen it, send me a clip. Maybe I'll put it up there, and I'll even include your commentary and promote your channel for it that way, because that's something I like to do, is promoting more subs and players, because we don't have that many PvP content makers. Some of the ones that we do have left are absolutely terrible, and they just give misinformation, and I've been trying to correct that for ages on the old channel, and when that went down, I just really didn't have time to keep making videos. So again, bad information is getting back out there, and there's not much I can do about it. But if you are an up-and-coming Souls content maker and that you do have a meta build that I haven't included that you do think is meta, and you can give a coherent argument, then yeah, go for it. I'll tweet it out. I don't know. If you want me to upload it, I will do if I think it's good. And then we can maybe get some more promotion out there, more content makers out there, and hopefully to get some semblance of the community. Because unfortunately, I don't have time to put my life on pause at the moment for content, so I think it'd be good if we get some more people to do it. Anyway, till whenever I make another video, I'll probably, hopefully, do some duels and some rebuilds at some point, but I have no idea on the timescale. If I stream, I stream. If I don't, I don't. But I'm looking forward to some other games coming up soon, especially Monster Hunter World. Some people have got me in on that. But I'll see you all next time. This is Reverend out. Have a great one, everyone.